Welcome back to Kings of Columbus on the podcast. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. You got to listen to this one, and you have to listen all the way through. I know there are some of you who are getting accustomed to the length of Kings of Columbus, but this one matters. It's all about tackles, offensive tackles. Ohio State situation, we're going to dive into left tackle to right tackle, to Joshua Simmons, to Josh Fryar, to Tegra Shabola, to Luke Montgomery, to everybody in the mix at Ohio State. We're going to talk about Ohio State's history at tackle and how this year stacks up to the past 2 decades. We're going to talk about off the top how much this matters. And if the tackle play is not up to Ohio State standard, what might that mean for the Ohio State offense in 2023? And then in an undertaking that no one else would undertake. Nobody. You will not find anyone else doing this. We did it for you and for ourselves because we liked it. Landis and I split up the Power 69. It's not the Power 65 anymore. It's the Power 69 because the Big 12 added 4 teams this year. And we went through the tackle, projected starting offensive tackles at every school to try to figure out where Ohio State fits in among their peers. And we are going to tell you that we believe Ohio State has the blank best tackle combo among the 69 teams playing college football at the highest level. Landis, is this a crazy person undertaking by us, or are we serving Ohio State fans with this topic?
I'm not sure the two are mutually exclusive. I think I think it's both. It wasn't that hard. Like, it was probably 2 hours of research. For a 2 hour
I had an
show.
extra conference, so I had 3 hours.
You did. I only had 2, and then we both did Notre Dame, which was like the easiest one to do. So I'm glad.
Does Notre Dame have the best tackle in the country? Yes, they do. Okay,
yeah,
I take them.
Right.
Okay. First, we have to tell them, Landis, whether this matters, because what Ohio State has is, I think, probably the best collection of skill talent in the country. Mm-hmm. I think most people would agree. You got some Washington, unless Washington has 2,000-yard receivers returning as well. You can make some cases elsewhere. They have the best receivers. And then you add the depth of the running back room and an experienced tight end in Cade Stover who can make plays. I think they had the best skill talent on offense in the country. So they're going to have a lot of options for this new quarterback. But if the tackle play is not up to Ohio State's standard, how much of an effect do you believe that can and will have on this season? And honestly, if you say, they're probably fine no matter what the tackles do, maybe we can set our notebooks on fire.
I don't go there automatically. I think it's like the context matters of like who you're going to play throughout the year too. So if I wasn't looking at like a schedule that included like Chop Robinson, like I think like Chop Robinson, who we talked about, or you mentioned on an earlier show this week, lined up against inexperienced tackles who don't have their feet under them by the midpoint of the season. Like that's a potentially an issue. That's potentially a thing that changes the win to a loss. So there are things like that on the schedule. I think there's enough good defensive line play. It's not up and down all 12 games, but there's enough good defensive line play that I think subpar tackle play could bite Ohio State. And then like, what does that mean? I don't know. One loss doesn't necessarily throw them off course. But it matters. Like it's you at least want to be certain of it, right? or be confident in it. And I think if you are, if you're the kind of person who tends to lean toward the more rosy outlook of things, I think you can convince yourself that Ohio State, while at the moment does not stack up all that well, if you look at some other tackle tandems across the country, has 2 guys in the presumed starters of Josh Fryar and Josh Simmons who have good athletic upside, like good potential. Maybe not like first team all Big Ten caliber this year, but if they're 2-year starters, maybe you can see that coming 2 years down the line. Like I don't want to make it sound like the cupboard is entirely bare here, because I don't really think that it is. But compared to where Ohio State has started from in the past, this does not stack up great. And I do think for a team that has a lot else going for it, that could ultimately be the Achilles heel if it is not a position that improves throughout the season.
We're going to get into the specific guys. And one thing I want to say off the bat is the intention here is not to criticize specific players. I think there are players in this situation who are in an unfair situation because the staff, the previous staff, didn't build the room, the offensive tackle, the offensive line room around them to the normal standard. And so now you are going to be putting guys in situations that I think maybe they're not ready for. And in most years at Ohio State, they would not be put in this situation because I do think the cupboard's bare. And I think people by the end of this podcast might be in panic mode. I
don't think you can get me there. So I will balance that out.
You're a rock. You're such a rock. I watched Joshua Simmons' game against Fresno State last year. I know you said I had not watched a ton of Simmons film, just like some highlight clips and stuff. I wanted to watch a whole game. I just grabbed a game that was on YouTube, a full game. I wanted it to be later in the year because he was a true freshman last year. I was like, let's let the guy play. I mean, he's never played.
He's a redshirt freshman.
Sorry. Yeah. He'd never played. Give him a break. Give him a break. So it was like week 9. I think it was their 8th game. And Fresno State was good. I wanted to see a good caliber opponent. After watching him, then I checked the PFF grade and it was his worst graded game of the year. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah. But that's the one I watched. So that's the one that I'm going to talk about. So we'll do that when we get to Josh Simmons. I have used the 2021 Ohio State-Michigan game as a reference for how important is tackle play because that year their tackles were good.
Yep.
Thayer Munford's left tackle, who we'll get into. Thayer Munford, perhaps one of the top 10 program-saving players that Ohio State's had in the last 20 years. Top 5? That's a good offseason podcast. Take this guy out and holy moly, the whole house falls down kind of thing. That guy is what's the wall called when you it holds up the whole house at one wall? Because some walls you knock down, nobody cares. Another wall you knock down and the whole house collapses. That was Thayer Munford, 4 years. You don't know the wall. You're not going to name that. Name that wall.
I'm trying to think of the name of that wall.
I know people yelling at us because we've never built a house.
Sorry.
So in 2021, Thayer Munford at left tackle and Nicholas Petit-Frere at right tackle are good. But in the Michigan game, Thayer Munford grades out at 52.4 on PFF. That's bad. Nicholas Petit-Frere, 48.3 on PFF. That's even worse. According to PFF, Nicholas Petit-Frere and Thayer Munford the rest of the year gave up 23 hurries. In all the other games they played combined, they gave up 13 in the Michigan game. So they were getting beat by Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo constantly, and that was throwing off the Ohio State offense. So my point here is to find a circumstance.
The 2021 Michigan game, Thayer was playing guard.
Oh, because wait. He was playing. Did he move in the middle of the game?
He moved in the game, yeah, because he got steamrolled by Aiden Hutchinson at one play.
Yeah,
but he started.
He played half the game at tackle, right? And then they put DeWand in and tried to do something, right? So there was some stuff. There was some stuff. Wait, what am I thinking of wrong?
The starting tackles, that was the year they moved Thayer to guard so that DeWand could play tackle. So the starting tackles were DeWand and MPF. Thayer played guard. I think MPF might have gotten hurt in that game.
I am besmirching the good name of Thayer Munford because I have things reversed in my head. The bottom line is those guys, the tackle play was good much of that year. Yeah, it's Petit-Frere and DeWand that whole year. It's good much of that year, and then there's an issue. Right. And when you have an issue, all of a sudden your offense doesn't function as well. And so I'm trying to think, Landis, of what happens when your tackles have issues. And that could be because your good tackles are facing excellent edge guys in Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo, or it could be because your tackles aren't that great. And even when they're facing okay guys, they're having trouble. So that's my point in trying to sort of just search for circumstances of what this could look like maybe at its worst. That's what I went to, because that to me, that's one of the worst days for Ohio State trying to stop an opposing pass rush. And then I want to touch a little bit on how often we think that could be a problem, because you kind of already touched on that. But do you know what I'm trying to get to here? That idea of what happens if your tackle play kind of messes up your offense.
Yeah, and I think we have seen probably kind of both examples of what you're describing over the last few years. Like 2016, Isaiah Prince was just like sort of bad no matter who they played. In 2021, they were good up until they faced guys who were elite, and then they weren't good enough. So I guess you have to ask yourself, like, which of the two would you rather be? I think you'd rather be the latter, and then like hope you don't come up against that matchup that you can't handle, or hope that you do a better job of scheming against that matchup, which I think is another conversation to be had about that game. Maybe Ohio State didn't do enough to help out its tackles who were kind of matched up against guys they really couldn't handle in that game. And if you are confident in your staff's ability to do that, then maybe you become less worried about a potential tackle situation that is less than what you've come to expect at a program. But I don't know that I think it's a deal breaker, because it's hard. We're going to get into the history of Ohio State tackles, right? So I'm not trying to jump to a new topic here, but like they won a national championship with a former defensive lineman playing right tackle, and like a guy who wasn't drafted and had no NFL career to speak of, in Darryl Baldwin. There's a first rounder opposite him, but like I don't think you need like two rock star tackles to do what Ohio State wants to do. And we had a conversation maybe on the first episode of Kings about like teams that have had this scenario where they don't have like established tackle play or an established quarterback. And in the process of doing that, like I looked at Clemson's offensive lines from their two national title teams. They had 9 different starting offensive linemen, and only 2 of them got drafted. And the guy that was like their 4-year starting left tackle didn't get drafted. So I don't think you need 2 Parrish Johnsons to win a national title. You might need a little luck if you don't have them in terms of matchups, but I don't think that the situation that they're in currently is like an automatic not good enough, can't get there with what you have.
So I mean, but Darryl Baldwin in 14 and Chase Ferris in 15 were sort of a Josh Fryar, I think, type players at right tackle. But the difference was they had a first round draft pick at left tackle in Taylor Decker. And I just think having no sure things, and in my mind, they have no sure things at tackles, is just a different animal. Because if you're like, all right, well, whatever we do, Taylor Decker will handle his business. And if we need to help on the other side, have the tight end there, have the back help on that side, then we have a plan. If you have 2 questionable tackles, that's where I think that's an entirely different. So it's not that you need 2 Paris Johnsons, because like nobody ever has 2 Paris Johnsons. It's that
Notre Dame might this year.
Well, that's true. I'd like to maybe know that I have one guy that's like, okay. And maybe you think Josh Fryar is that. I don't think that right now. I don't think we have enough anything on Josh Fryar to think, no, it's definitely going to be fine. I don't think you can be there. Now, will it matter? Notre Dame had Isaiah Foskey last year as an edge guy. He's gone. They're going to count on Javonte Jean-Baptiste. So I don't know if there are edge guys at Notre Dame who are going to make Ohio State pay. Wisconsin had Nick Herbig. Wisconsin often has like a guy who has some sack totals and some pressures and hurries. They lost him. I don't know for sure. Reading about Wisconsin, I'm not exactly sure how much they're going to get after the quarterback this year. But Penn State, Michigan have it. Chop Robinson, we keep talking about. He's a real guy. They can hunt matchups with him, and I think he can be a problem. And then Braden McGregor, and I think they like what Jalen Harrell's doing in camp at Michigan, plus like really good interior guys, right, led by Chris Jenkins. I think Michigan could be a problem. And again, I would talk the other day that I just was rewatching last year's Ohio State Michigan game and trying to remember which players played and getting that actually correct, as opposed to what I did earlier in the show. They had just some specific plays. Again, we talked about the Enoch Vamahi comes in for Matt Jones, gets blown up. That kind of kills a drive. And then Donovan Jackson got beat by Chris Jenkins and got a holding call on the check down to Chip Trainum that picked up 30 yards and then was exacerbated by the G. Scott headbutt. But that starts with, Donovan Jackson got beat and had to hold to prevent CJ Stroud from getting hit. So that's like 2, and that's interior guys, but it's an example to me, Landis, of, if you have guys on the line that get beat, 5 or 6 times total in a game, it can take points off the board. It kills drives at wrong times. And I do think, as we have this tackle discussion, I think that's certainly something that they have to be thinking about because of the questions they have there.
Yeah, I think so too. And I actually think like Andre Carter at Indiana was transferred from Western Michigan defensive end, who was pretty productive MAC player. I think you're going to know early like what these guys are made of. Like, and Indiana's going to blitz the heck out of them too. Like, so it's not going to be something Ohio State's tackles and offensive line in general are going to be able to ease into, which I think maybe is not necessarily a bad thing, because I'm not like fearful of like, oh, this one guy from Indiana is going to wreck the game, but I think he can tell you a little something about yourself while Ohio State still wins somewhat comfortably. So yeah, I think your concerns are well founded. This is as like a baseline starting point. This does not look particularly good compared to where Ohio State's been in my time covering the team, probably in your entire time covering the team. And I don't know, to go back to what you said, something you said earlier, like I would say that like both Josh Fryar and Josh Simmons have maybe somewhat significantly higher ceilings than Darryl Baldwin and Chase Ferris. I don't think either one of them is ever going to be a first rounder, but I don't know. Could they both be Jamarco Jones? Like Jamarco was like a fourth rounder, right? Like a all Big Ten guy, not like a superstar.
And we can get to that now. Now, and the other thing I'll just throw in, but it's not a quarterback podcast. You said Clemson when they won their 2 national titles. Well, they had a bunch. They also had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence as their quarterback. So, okay, do you have a problem solver at quarterback who, with his brain, his arm, and his legs, is going to make problems disappear? Justin Fields was a problem solver, man. CJ Stroud's a problem solver. I don't know. Maybe. But also, this would also be a very good time to not be putting problem solving in the lap of your quarterback necessarily as they ease into this a little bit. But I think they are going to put it in their lap. So, which is the thing that you went back to when you did your tackle quarterback research. It's not a quarterback pod, but I just wanted to mention Clemson had Deshaun Watson.
They certainly did. And they had like a dozen 6'5" receivers who ran 4.3s. Like there was the skill around them to mitigate what was probably like average offensive line play. Same thing with like LSU in 2019. That offensive line I don't think was actually all that good, but they won the Joe Moore award because everyone else around them was awesome. So, but I also I think that it is projecting a lot on whoever the quarterback is, but I think Ohio State probably has the dudes around this offensive line to mitigate some of those shortcomings we think they might have too.
All right, let's talk about Ohio State history. I went back like the last 20 years or so, and the point is, here's the 2 things that I think are the best ways to prepare yourself to have tackles. So one is to bring in super high pedigree guys in recruiting, and maybe they're ready to play early, and maybe they would be sitting here without much experience, but you'd be like, well, what do you, I mean, they were the number 18 player in the country. They're ready to start in year 2. They're awesome. They're Paris Johnson. By the way, the idea that Paris Johnson as a sophomore couldn't start at tackle here. And now they're like, please, can we have tackles? If Paris Johnson was on this roster now, they would cut him in half and start him at both tackle spots. So there's that. You don't have to be experienced, but like, give me a pedigree to believe in a little bit.
Yeah.
Or maybe your recruiting ranking doesn't matter anymore, but you have some battle scars. You've been through the grind a little bit. You've learned how to play the position. You learned some tricks. You gained a bunch of college strength, and you're just an old fighter. And maybe preferably you have some experience under you now, right? You played in some different circumstances. And maybe preferably like you have like the guy on the other side is super talented. So maybe you got like a young, super talented guy on one side and an old fighter on the other side. And I get that too. And maybe Josh Fryar is that. Maybe I'm describing Josh Fryar, except again, we're going to go through around the country. I just would feel better about Josh Fryar if he was Josh Fryar who started 12 games last year because he beat out Matt Jones at guard and he kicked out the center. And he kicked out the tackle. Right. Yeah. So this is not, I don't think again that Josh Fryar is behind on his own timeline, but I don't know. He could have beaten out Matt Jones last year. That wouldn't have been impossible to happen. Right. And now you'd be moving a guard out to tackle, because when we get into Ohio State history right now, there's a lot of circumstances of that. And teams do that all the time. Doug Nestor at West Virginia, a one-time Ohio State target, went to Virginia Tech, then transferred to West Virginia. He's back. He's a 4-year starter at guard at West Virginia, stayed another year to start at tackle. Like, you can kick a guy outside. So those are the, like, right? You got a high school pedigree, boom, you're ready to play early, or you've really been grinding it out and you've been preparing for this for years and years and years. If you're neither of those things, I'm a little nervous.
Totally fair. And it's actually interesting, like, I promise you I'm not trying to push us ahead to later subjects. It's just like, you make me think of these things. When I went through the conferences that I went through, there were far more examples of the lower ranked grizzled veteran than there were former 5-star guy.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting and probably says something about offensive line play. And I think this conversation is entirely different if Josh Fryar did what you just laid out as a potential pathway to being the team's right tackle. And like, if Josh Simmons maybe had a very similar year to what he had last year, but he just did it here instead of at San Diego State, I think people might feel a little bit better about that too. Certainly would want to see improvement, but like, oh, he started 12 games at Ohio State. He's going to grow from that and get better. But it's just not looked at the same way when he did that in the Mountain West. So, and I get why that's the case. So they don't have that.
I can't wait to get to my Mountain West film study. This is the first Mountain West film study of my life, and I loved it.
Yeah, they don't have that to fall back on, like, anywhere with any of the 4 guys that are in the conversation here. Like, the closest thing they have to both scenarios we've described is Luke Montgomery, and even he is not, like, he wasn't a 5-star prospect and probably isn't going to start anyway. So it's not something you can really grab onto to make yourself feel better about the situation.
Okay, so let's run through this very quickly. Again, 2002 Ohio State national title team. Shane Olivier is playing tackle for them, right? The late, great Shane Olivier, great college football player. Ivan Douglas is a left tackle. Like, unbelievably, both of the tackles from the 2002 national championship team have passed away. It's just awful. It's just awful. So, again, that's not 2 Paris Johnsons for a team that wins the national title, right? To your point. Although Shane Olivier is a pretty darn good college tackle. So 03, Rob Sims is a left tackle in 03 and 04. He winds up being an NFL guy, winds up moving to guard later in his career. In 05, that was my first year covering the team. Rob Sims moves to guard. But in 03, he's kind of new in there. And then Olivier is still the right tackle, so it's not 2 new guys. 04, it's Sims. Tim Schaefer starts the year as the right tackle, isn't it, and loses the job to Kirk Barton, your friend and mine, who, again, Kirk Barton is like, we could put Kirk Barton on a list of guys who saved Ohio State at a position in the last 25 years. Kirk Barton takes over as, I think, a redshirt freshman in 04, starts in 04, 05, 06, and 07. He's like a 3.5-year starter at Ohio State. So he just locks it down. 05, they're really good. They moved Doug Dadish out to tackle, and Sims moves to guard, but Dadish had started previously on the offensive line, so he's not a brand new guy, right? So, so far, no circumstances like this. Dadish graduates 06, they bring in Alex Boone. Alex Boone is a second-year guy. He's a 5-star from Cleveland. He's the starter in 06, 07, 08. So he started in 06, Landis, as a second-year guy. He was biding his time in 05, but that's perfect. So then by then, so in 06 and 07 with Boone and Barton, you have like a great combination.
Yeah.
Barton's been around the block. Boone's the new 5-star, and give me that every day of the week.
That is, yeah. And there's some of that in what we'll talk about later, like veteran guy on one side, 5-star you can't help but be excited about on the other side. Never played, know nothing about him. Maybe he stinks, but he's a 5-star, so we're going to get excited about him.
So then in 08, you have Alex Boone back as a 3rd-year starter at left tackle. You play Bryant Browning at right tackle, who wins that job and then winds up being a multi-year starter at guard. He's more a guard than a tackle, but like, he came in and took the job, and it maybe was a little unsure for a while there, but you had Alex Boone. You had 5-star future Super Bowl guy Alex Boone locking down one side. And then, by the way, Bryant Browning won the job and wound up being a 3-year starter at Ohio State, just more inside. So it all works out, right? It all works out. But again, it's not 2 guys. You're not looking for 2. So we still haven't found a circumstance like this. 09, Jim Cordell winds up being the left tackle. He's started everywhere on the offensive line. So I don't think Jim Cordell's the world's ideal left tackle. I think he's more of an interior guy, but he's a veteran.
Yeah.
So you figure it out. You play him at left tackle. And then who do you play at right tackle? 5-star JB Shugarts, who you brought in to do this. He's in the 2008 class. JB Shugarts, who's going to be the starting right tackle in 09, 10, and 11. He's a 5-star starting in year 2. We're all good with that. So he's not experienced, but you have grizzled veteran Jim Cordell moving positions. So it's like two new tackles, but one guy's a veteran moving positions and one guy's a second-year 5-star who's right on his path. So maybe a little uncertain, but I'll take that.
Yep, definitely take that.
2010, Mike Adams. Now he's ready. Mike Adams, who's a 5-star in the same class as JB Shugarts. He's now in his 3rd year. He's the starting left tackle. JB Shugarts is the starting right tackle. It's perfect. 2010, big time dudes. 2011 gets all jacked up. I don't know if you heard about that.
I am familiar with what happened there. Yeah.
Mike Adams is one of the suspended guys, but he comes back and plays. It's kind of like it's Adams and Shugarts. So it should have been normal. They would have been right on track. Their 4th-year guys who are 5-star recruits are good to go. 2012, a little dicier here. Jack Mewhort is your starting left tackle in 2012. Jack Mewhort, it's a position change. He'd started at guard the year before. So now he's kicking out the left tackle. And right tackle, Reed Fragel, friend of the program, friend of the podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Reed Fragel converts from tight end. Kind of always thought he might be a tackle. Converts from tight end as a 1-year starter at right tackle. It's a little like this. I don't think Reed Fragel and Josh Fryar are completely different, right? Kind of like, okay, late in the career, okay, let's do this thing. But Mewhort's played before. So it's not as... Now, Josh Simmons has played, but it's in the Mountain West, and I have opinions about the Mountain West. So it's a little... So this is still more certain because Mewhort has played before. 13, it's Mewhort at left tackle as a 2nd-year starter. And who's the right tackle? Taylor Decker. 2nd-year guy, was not a 5-star, but was like in the 200s.
Yeah, like 150. Yeah.
Gets his doors blown off by Khalil Mack in his first start. We're like, can this guy play? And then it's like, oh, sorry, Taylor. And it all works out. Those are your starting tackles in 2013, Mewhort and Decker. Now, 14, you're going to win a national title. You move the right tackle to left tackle. Taylor Decker's the starting left tackle in 14 and 15. You're great. And you're putting in a grizzled veteran opposite the future first-rounder. Darrell Baldwin in 14, Chase Ferris in 15. Super talented dude, grizzled veteran. I'm okay with it. All good. 16. This is the only time in the last 2 decades that Ohio State has been in a situation that I think parallels what they're in right now, which is 2 new, kind of completely new starters at tackle. And they are Jamarco Jones as a 3rd-year guy at left tackle and Isaiah Prince as a 2nd-year guy at right tackle. 2016, but Jamarco Jones is a top 100 player in his class, and Isaiah Prince is a top 100 player in his class. And I saved this Jamarco Jones thing because you were like, I don't know, they played Jamarco Jones, and he only turned into a 4th-rounder. Maybe this is like that. To me, Jamarco Jones, they had to fight their butt off in recruiting to keep Jamarco Jones. He visited Michigan State, and everybody lost their mind. Illinois guy. That's the perfect path. So Jamarco Jones didn't start as a freshman, as a sophomore, but everybody knew he was going to replace Taylor Decker as the starting left tackle when Taylor Decker left. Everybody knew it. From the minute he got here, it was the perfect plan. Now, he didn't peak. He didn't peak the way Taylor Decker or Paris Johnson did. Mm-hmm. And he was a good player, not a great player. He's like an all Big Ten level player, not an All-American level player. Right. But like, I don't think either Simmons or Fryar, to me, would be on a Jamarco Jones path right now because Jamarco Jones was perfectly on track, top 100 recruit, back up Taylor Decker for 2 years, and the job is yours in year 3. I don't think that's where we are with these guys.
No, I don't think the path is the same. But I look at the players and think they can become a version of that, of what Jamarco was for this team. Like yeah, you're right. They don't have the recruiting pedigree. They didn't have the tutelage of backing up a 1st-round pick for a couple of years.
That's 2 big things.
At
the end of that, that's 2 huge differences.
I guess because like I don't just assume automatically that means they're not going to be good. I think that's probably what it is. Like Josh Fryar was not the true backup for DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson. He played alongside of them for 3 years. What's the difference? You know what I mean? Like it's not like he was around guys like that. Watch them play, learn from them. Like why can't? And I get it. Like he was a number 500 and Jamarco was in the 100s. Like the recruiting pedigree is not the same thing. I think offensive line is a position where that matters the least, and sometimes it doesn't matter at all.
That's what Ed Warner says too.
Yeah, well, I know, and like people get get in a tizzy around here when they don't land 5-star offensive linemen. And I'm not trying to have the stars matter conversation. I'm just saying, anecdotally, it sure seems like offensive linemen outperform their recruiting rankings a whole lot.
This is going to be a good podcast. It's the first time we're going to fight. This
Can't
is going
wait.
to be good. I'm going to lose, I think. It's an offense. It's not, this is not the territory that I should be fighting you. We both think Cam Johnston's like the best player in Ohio State history, though, right? We agree on that.
No one has ever done their job in an Ohio State uniform better than Cam Johnson has.
Can we please have him on? Jamarco Jones, 16 and 17 is left tackle. Prince is the right tackle in 16 and 17. Prince is still the right tackle in 18. Who takes over the starting right tackle in 18? I was just rereading a projected depth chart from 2018 that I did in January. And at that time, I said, I think maybe Isaiah Prince will bump over from right to left and Thayer Munford will win the right tackle job. But in writing that, it was like Thayer Munford got here in 2017 as a lower rated recruit and blew everybody away.
Yep.
And so coming into 18, he didn't really have any more experience, right, than Fryar or Simmons does right now. But everybody was excited about Thayer Munford because he got to Columbus and got down to business. And it was like, who cares about the and his recruiting rating was whatever. In the 200s or 300s, there was what's as much about, moving schools and academic stuff as there was ability. But he got here from the jump and was like, I got this. And then winds up being the starting left tackle in 18, 19, and 20, moves to guard in 21. So that was maybe the last, that was an example of maybe some uncertainty. But even in that uncertainty, there was a dude who had been getting people excited before that battle.
Yeah, and had like, the thing about Thayer was he had athletic traits of a guy who should have been ranked higher. And I think in a weird way, like the questions about like academic eligibility impacted his recruiting ranking for some reason, which is very strange. Yeah. I don't know why that would even be taken into consideration. Clearly underranked in hindsight, but did not have had a different athletic profile than both the guys we're talking about this year.
So that's Munford and Prince then in 18. In 19, it's Munford and Brandon Bowen. Brandon Bowen beats out Nicholas Petit-Frere in that job battle. Brandon Bowen is a super veteran guy. I think he was a fifth-year guy by then.
Fifth-year guy and had started at guard the year before until he broke his leg.
Yeah. So again, kicks out from inside and is super-duper-duper veteran and is paired with Thayer Munford, who has now been a starter for a year. So good with that. 2020, it's Thayer Munford at left tackle. Nicholas Petit-Frere as a 5-star, wins a job in year 3, on track. 2021, they kick Petit-Frere to the left side. DeJuan Jones causes a shuffle. Forget the recruiting rating. He gets to August and says, I got to play. And they're like, you got to play. And he wins the job. And he causes everybody else to move around. And again, I'm looking forward to having this kind of recruiting discussion with you. That I like. I would rather, to me, your whole class at Ohio State should be top 200 and 1,000 and below. I just don't think they should be recruiting guys in the 400s, because if you're in the 400s, it's kind of like, we know you, but maybe you're a little short on something. If you're 1,000, it might be like, we don't even know where you came from. Right. Diamond in the rough kind of thing. Yeah. And then last year, it's Paris and DeJuan. So the only year where they really were bringing in like two guys who had never started at Ohio State before at the same time is 2016, and they were both top 100 recruits. So I think this is the most uncertain tackle situation at Ohio State in at least the last 20 years, and we didn't go back much before that. So I don't know, but comparing Ohio State to itself, this is not the way Ohio State normally does business, and I think wants to do business. Do we agree on that?
Absolutely agree on that. I agree on everything you said. I think it is the most uncertain. This was not the plan to get here. But when I say like, I don't mean, I think Josh Fryar was recruited and became a guy that they started to view as someone who had or starter potential. But I guess like being uncertain of his best position, combined with having to bring in a transfer, combined with both of their lack of recruiting pedigree, combined with the fact that there's like no tackle experience other than Josh Fryar's one start in an Ohio State uniform on this roster. It is as precarious as it has been in at least the last 2 decades and probably before then.
So I think it's fair to compare Ohio State to itself. So let's dig in now on the guys that we're talking about. And again, we're not out to say that guys who were 20 years old and playing football in college and not getting paid by the school aren't good enough. This is a discussion about the end of the Greg Studrawa era and the recruiting misfires as part of that. And now it's also on Justin Fry and his ability to develop guys and also go out and win some big-time recruiting battles. But we have seen this coming, and it's here. So let's start on the right side with Josh Fryar. And again, I think you've talked about this already, but for people who want to know, is Josh Fryar the right tackle? You nailed this down.
Yeah, I think he is. So they're moving back and forth, and Justin Fry is like, oh, well, depends on what day you're out there, and he could be on the left side. So Justin Fry said that. I left. I went over to Josh Fryar. I said, Josh, have you been on the left side at any point, in the last 10 days? Maybe I didn't say 10 days. Maybe I said 5 days. He said no. I was like, okay. Yeah. So they're not flip flopping back and forth, I think. And Ryan Day basically said as much when we talked to him on Monday. He said something to the effect of I think it's unlikely that we flip them back to where they were at the start of camp. So it's Josh Fryar on the right side. And I guess Luke Montgomery sort of travels with him. Although I guess you could look at Luke as a guy who could operate on either side.
So Josh Fryar at the right side. It seems like that's where he's the most comfortable. Mm-hmm. What do you think that move is about? Do you think it's about making Josh Fryar as comfortable as possible? Do you think that Josh Simmons and or Tegra Shabola, who are now on the left side, showed anything that said, oh, no, they're better on the left side? I asked Justin Fry. Justin Fry is very hard, a tough nut to crack.
Yep.
Do you view the traits that you want at left tackle and right tackle any differently? And he said, both guys got to play in space, but not really. So I'm why? Why did Josh Fryar play left tackle, first team left tackle, seemingly every snap of spring football, and now he's going to be Ohio State starting right tackle?
I think he played left tackle on every rep of spring ball because there are no stakes and you want to see if he can do it. And I think the reason he's moved back is because if you take all of the available tackle options and think about left side, right side, any pairing you can come up with, and ask yourself, what is the best combo of player and spot that can maximize who they are? I think the answer is Josh Fryar at right tackle. Does that make sense?
Yes. Do you believe that left tackle is any more important than right tackle?
No, I agree with Justin Fry on that. I think 10 years ago, I might have thought differently. Because all teams are going to do is put their best pass rusher on the side that they think you're most vulnerable. I think it has less to do with quarterback blind side and it has more to do with matchups. So I think maybe you want your left tackle to be slightly more athletic. And maybe it depends on the guard that's playing next to them too. But no, I don't think there's a tremendous distinction between the two anymore.
So Josh Fryar looks like he has a board in his shoulder pads. I told him that he, to me, is the most intimidating shoulder broadness of any Buckeye since Andy Katzenmoyer. And he's like, oh, thank you for saying that. I asked him what his wingspan was. He said he thinks it's 6'9". He does seem long. And when I said, what do you want to be? What are your traits? What do you want to be? He said, I want to be the best right tackle in the country at pass pro. So he wants he didn't say I want them all, people, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about Josh Fryar that makes that anybody should think, yeah, this guy can handle this. He's ready for this. He has the talent. He has the experience to be a good starting right tackle for Ohio State.
I think he's got good feet. And I think it's a something that translated from him for basketball. He's a good basketball player. I think he wrestled too. He is more of an all around athlete than I think you would expect from a guy who's kind of built the way he is. I wouldn't say that he has an athletic frame. He doesn't have a Parrish Johnson frame. But I think he moves really well. I think he moves better than you would assume by looking at him, which maybe I said earlier this week. I thought the little bit we got to see of him in the run game last year, he played with good pad level. He can climb up to the second level. I think you play a super speedy, twitchy pass rusher. Maybe that's a tough matchup for him, but I don't think he's like a statue by any means. I think he can move well enough, if not better than that, to be an effective right tackle. I don't think he's going to blossom into a no doubt about it first round pick, but I think he has all the tools necessary to be a solid starting Big Ten tackle, especially if he is on the right side, where it just seems like those body movements are more comfortable to him. It took him a long time and he said he started to feel comfortable at left tackle like 3 practices into the summer. We don't know. We didn't get to see it. We had to take him at his word. I never really thought he looked comfortable doing that in spring ball. Like at the start of spring ball, when they weren't really doing much, like maybe you could like squint and kind of convince yourself that it was going to look better. But like once they started doing stuff, I thought it was pretty clear that it just didn't sync up for him. And when he was on the right side, it just seemed much more comfortable. And some guys are that way. Some guys can play both sides no matter what. Some guys have to stick to one side because it just comes naturally to them. And I think he is a natural right side of the line tackle.
He said, I kind of was hoping I'd be winding up back here. And it wasn't like you played, I think, sort of like, hey, when did you get comfortable on the left side, thinking that it would be in the spring? And he's like, well, I never in the spring. And the way he said it was, I basically got comfortable left tackle in August, this preseason, right before they moved me back to right tackle.
Yeah.
So we think this move is mostly about maximizing the player that Josh Fryar can be in the name of, let's try to get as much certainty at one of these spots as we can.
That's how I view it. Maybe that's not true, but I think they have they have 2 right tackles and the guys they want to start. And they probably view Josh as the guy who has the higher ceiling there at the moment. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. That's how I view it.
So what is your, I don't know. Let's assign 1 to 10. 1 is right tackle is going to be a real problem for much of the year that might hold this team back. And 10 is good to go. Like it's like good to go. Like going to be really good tackle play. Where do you think you are on your expectations?
I am at like a, I want to be like realistic. I say I'm at like a 6.7.
Okay. I'm probably at a 5. And I do think the thing you said, again, there's like tackle play and then there's like facing Georgia tackle play. So I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I just think we still have to be realistic about this. Is a 4th-year guy who was rated in the 500 as a recruit and is going to start for the first time. And if we were saying that about somebody at any other position on the field, we were saying like, who's a starting X receiver? It's like, well, it's this 4th-year guy. He was rated in the 500s as a recruit, but he did start last year when the one guy had a tummy ache. Like, I think it'll be okay. You'd be like, what are you talking about? If this was the starting corner, it was like, what? Like, I think we'd be like, what do you mean? How is that going to work? It's just not the standard. It's not the standard. Now, yes, offensive line, recruiting ratings and evaluations are more difficult because you can see that a guy is fast and can catch a ball. So I do think that's an important thing to note, but I still am somewhat reluctant to think, hey, they're going to be fine at right tackle just because Pat Elflein was rated lower than Josh Fryar was coming out of high school, and he wound up as an all Big Ten guy at guard. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I know there are examples of it, but I still kind of don't assume it.
And I don't think you should. It's a, I don't know. It's a tricky conversation for me, like, because I don't think you should assume it. But then I think, like, in not assuming it, you just sort of come off as dismissive of it. And I don't think that's actually true. It's just sort of how it lands for me. And like, I tend to get like defensive about it sometimes when you're
defending your guys.
Yeah. Well,
it's just about the O-line that way.
It's unique. It's a very unique position. When it comes to that kind of stuff, it is the most difficult position, I think, to evaluate for people who do those kind of things. And part of it is like general understanding of the position itself. And part of it too is how much these guys can change physically once they get to college. Like Josh Fryar was at 500 because I think people thought he was a guard. And I think he's like 2 inches taller now than he was when he came out of high school. I think he's like closer to 6'7" than he is to 6'5" when he came out. And like that changes the projection for guys too. So it's just hard. If Josh Fryar was 6'7", 305 pounds coming out of high school, he probably would not have been the 500th player in the country. But he was because he was 6'5" and probably 270 pounds.
All right. Luke Montgomery looks like the backup there. It's a big deal that Luke Montgomery as a true freshman is in the 2 deep, and he is, and everybody keeps saying that. He's not a contender to start the way that we watch practice, like the 2 that we've seen, just the way guys move around. I thought maybe the way, I don't know, trying to read between the lines, there was a time when I thought the way Ryan Day was talking about it, like maybe he was, but it feels like no, Luke Montgomery is very solidly a second team guy, but he's not going to be one of the starters.
No, I think I don't know what they were doing with that because Ryan Day seemed to walk it back like kind of quickly, like because he said the name, everyone lit up like, whoa, Luke Montgomery might start, and he's like, hold on a second. I think they're very high on him, and deservedly so. Like I've liked everything I've seen from him when we got to watch him, when we've gotten to watch him in practice. Justin Fry does not seem all that keen on starting a true freshman. I bet a lot of offensive line coaches aren't, but he seemed especially emphatic especially emphatic, just kind of reminding us how difficult it is. And the fact that he's been around college football for a long time, has only seen one guy do it. And the guy that did so because 2 other guys got injured. But I don't want to, I don't dismiss the discussion, the Luke Montgomery discussion, because I think it is a good thing for Ohio State in the future. I just don't think it's a right now proposition, but it could be if he keeps coming along the way he's coming along. I don't know. Is it a week 8 proposition? Maybe. I don't want to be dismissive of that either.
Yeah. So that time of the year when everybody says freshmen aren't freshmen anymore, it's like, let's see what that looks like. Yeah. So, but he seems like the backup right tackle right now behind Josh Fryar. And yeah, Justin Fry said, I've been around college football since 2002, and I've seen 1, which I think is good. I think in the end is good. If you're telling me, the reason I got excited for a little bit, because if you're telling me that like a freshman's like, I'm taking a job, you can't keep me off the field, I'm here for it. If it's like, hey freshman, we're really pinched, could you maybe, then I'm not here for it. So I think that's not happening. Okay, left tackle. Josh Simmons. Tegra Shabola moved with him. I thought what we saw of the practice I thought Tegra Shabola did not look comfortable at left tackle. And just to me is like, that is not a thing that can happen anytime soon. I
agree. I am firmly in the Tegra as a guard camp, which is not like, you need good guards, and I think he's going to be a good one. I just don't know that I see a tackle there.
So that means, so now we are basically in default range. Okay. Yep. We don't think that the left tackle is Luke Montgomery, the true freshman. We don't think the left tackle is Tegra Shabola, the second-year player who's probably more of a guard and actually has been on the right side, it seems like, more than the left side so far in his career. Mm-hmm. So he's probably at the wrong position and on the uncomfortable side. We don't think it's Josh Fryar, who is clearly more comfortable at the right side. So it's the only other guy. And this makes me very worried for Ohio State. I think this could be a real problem. And in going through, I went through 45 teams and was writing down PFF grades for everybody who started last year and is expected to start this year. And I did not write down a PFF grade as low as Josh Simmons's 47.1 PFF grade as the starting right tackle at San Diego State last year. And just that sentence, Ohio State's starting left tackle was the guy who started at right tackle for a Mountain West team last year as a redshirt freshman. That sentence alone is mind-boggling to me. So maybe Josh Simmons is much more than that, but on its surface, that is a how did they let this happen kind of sentence.
I'm I am not as familiar as I should be with how they actually calculate PFF grades. Do you know how penalties are factored into that? Or if
I
they
don't.
are at all?
I don't.
Like, I wonder, because I think he wasn't the most penalized lineman in the country, but he was up there, and like almost all of them were false starts. And if like they're dinging him for false start penalties, um, I wonder what his grade would be otherwise. And I'm not saying that's the case, but like when I look at that grade, like that's in the back of my head, and I guess I could ask PFF if that's the case or not. But either way, the penalties I don't think would take his PFF grade from a 40 whatever it was to like an 80. So I don't know if it's that big of a difference. But it's like fair. Like he wasn't when Ohio State goes to get a transfer from a P or G5 program, really from anywhere, but especially a G5 program. I think you want that guy to at least demonstrate that he was the best player on his team, that he was an all conference level player. And Josh Simmons was not that. Should he have been that as a redshirt freshman? Maybe not. Maybe that's too high of a bar to clear for a redshirt freshman. But the fact that he like was not even an honorable mention Mountain West player, and seemingly, at least based off PFF grades, like maybe the worst of their 5 starting offensive linemen, does not fit the profile of the kind of transfers that I would like Ohio State to take. So I am with you on that assessment for sure. It does not mean to me that he cannot become a good player. But my default is I'm not assuming that he's going to become one either. I'll leave the door open for him to develop, I guess. But from a starting point, it's pretty bad.
I am not against Ohio State taking Josh Simmons as a transfer who knew Justin Fry from when Justin Fry recruited him at UCLA, who had better offers than San Diego State coming out, was ranked in the 300s, and got a bunch of reps in college last year. But the idea that he is coming here to be Ohio State's starting left tackle now is absolutely ludicrous. It is insane. If he was because he should be Vic Cutler. Vic Cutler is coming from Louisiana, right?
Yep, Louisiana Monroe, yeah.
And he's here. He has more experience than Josh Simmons does, right?
Yeah, he's older, yeah.
He's a multi-year player.
Yep.
And he's here, and he might be the backup center. But they weren't like, hey, we don't have anybody else. You're the starting center. Because let him come and develop. And I think maybe Josh Simmons will develop into a good player. I do not think it will happen this year. Because I think this is a borderline 5-alarm fire. I think this is possibly the least qualified starter at an important position that I have ever seen at Ohio State in 18 years doing this. This is unbelievable to me. And this is 0 about Josh Simmons. And it is 0 about what he might be. I don't think there is any way he's ready for this. I don't think there's any way that it's fair to put it on this guy. Fresno State, I watched the San Diego State-Fresno State game from last year. This was my evaluation of Joshua Simmons. He is good at handling what's right in front of him. If there's a pass rush guy right in front of him who's coming right at him, he can handle it. He does get to the second level and block linebackers in the run game pretty well, which is what his teammates say about him. You can see the athleticism. And I do think even like in that, it's like, oh, he's the best athlete on this offensive line. Maybe it was just Fresno State, but Fresno State was the best team in the Mountain West last year. Nobody in that game tried a pass rush move. And like the 2 times that somebody tried to go inside on Josh Simmons, he got beat. And what we saw in some pass rush drills, the second practice that we saw, he seemed to have trouble with guys who did anything other than run right into him. And I thought, having not like tried to watch offensive line and defensive line play in group of 5 conferences very much before, I thought it was rudimentary. Nobody tries to do anything. And then he also had a play where there was like a snap and a thing happened and he got frustrated and he punched the defensive end in the face and got a 15-yard penalty, and then got like a false start on the next play before they could get the next play off. And he had a holding penalty on the one time somebody dropped an inside move on him and he got beat. And it was like, okay, it's just raw. I think there's a good athlete in there and a good player who will become something when he's taught technique and gets used to Big Ten play. I thought it was incredibly raw, and it was game 9. So he played a few more games. Yep, they've had time to develop it. I can't imagine that it's going to be ready for now for Big Ten play. And I think the level of defense that you get in the Big Ten and the sophistication and the looks you're going to get, I think that Josh Simmons is going to get beat a lot. I think he's going to get beat by inside moves. I think he's going to get beat by guys with great technique. I think he's going to get beat on blitzes. You could see him trying to sort of find where he was supposed to be. There was an inside blitz that got through one time, and he was kind of just standing there, and it felt like, I think probably you were supposed to handle that. And it felt like it's too much to get that ready for now. And it's not about him. It's that Ohio State is making him do this. I can't believe it. I can't believe they didn't go get a 1-year guy who's been a 4-year starter somewhere average, who can just like do the job. I can't believe this is where they landed. I'm dumbfounded that this is how this shook out.
Well, they did try to get other guys.
I know, and they failed.
And they didn't get
in a can't fail situation. They failed.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I thought not taking a transfer portal tackle in the first window was about as bad of like roster management malpractice as I've seen here. And they rebounded with a guy who was at least a starter somewhere in the second window. But I don't know. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I guess I don't. When I watched Josh Simmons, like I thought I saw a guy that like overset a lot and got beat inside a lot. I guess my thing with him is like I just feel like if this was going to be a disaster, wouldn't we like have some inkling of that already? Like I know they wouldn't come to the podium and say that, but I feel like we are discerning enough, having done this a long enough time, to like pick up on vibes. And if we thought that they thought he was not ready for this, I think we would know that, wouldn't we?
I have perhaps gone too far with my evaluation of this, that when they say good things, it actually means things aren't great. When they say bad things, it means that guys are good, ready to go. In fact, that they are being like, no, we're ready. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. I was like, okay, perhaps the offensive line room doth protest like not enough. Like I just thought, I think they're trying to build something up. And I'm not calling any of the, like, I'm calling out the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And if Ryan Day was on this podcast, I wouldn't say anything different. I'm calling it's an insane situation. Who is Ohio State starting left tackle? San Diego State starting right tackle who had a 47 PFF grade. It doesn't square. So they don't. What is the option if not this? Because we've eliminated everybody else. So they have to talk this guy up. And by the way, I don't think he's all the way there with his body. I don't think he's the athlete he's going to be. He to me looks like a guy like freshmen look like when they get here, and then you see him 9 months later, and it's like, oh, well, that was one of those transformations. He has not yet gone through the transformation that they would put on social media. He's still the before, and that's not a criticism of him. It makes sense that he's the before. He was at San Diego State last year. He had COVID screw up the end of his high school career. He's still a before, and he's in an after world. How did they do this to him?
I mean, you want to run through the recruiting misses?
Yes, let's do it. So I think we have to do this.
That led them there?
How did we get here, Landis? We all saw it coming. And the thing that, again, that just surprises me is it was so glaring. I thought it would be like, I don't know, who needs $1.6 million in NIL to come be the starting left tackle? And by the way, we will promise you the job. I'm a little surprised because it's so gaping. It's so gaping. And I think Josh Simmons might be ready in 2024. But why are we here? Why are we here?
Because they swung and missed a million times on tackles. Like the reason that Greg Studrawa finally was relieved of his duties, and like people will point to like, oh, they got Tigger Shabola and Donovan Jackson and Parrish Johnson under Greg Studrawa. I think maybe Donovan would be the only one I might give him credit for. They just whiffed, man. They whiffed all the time on tackles. And it wasn't like they whiffed on their main guys and like didn't have secondary guys and like had years where they took like 2 tackles or like 1 tackle and a guy that might be a tackle. And it happened like class after class after class. And now it's caught up to them.
And it's one of those things, like sometimes, when they whiffed, Zed Mahalski's a third-year guy, right?
Yeah,
So
2021 class, yeah.
When they whiffed in the 21 class and then they flipped Zed Mahalski from Kentucky? Louisville, I think.
Louisville, yeah.
Flipped them from Louisville, and people were like, oh, whatever. It's like, no. Like it's a plan, you're on plan C, and it's not Zed Mahalski's fault. But you're on plan C. But if we can go, we can talk about J.C. Latham, who people thought at one point was maybe going to be a Buckeye. He's going to be the starting right tackle at Alabama this year. Blake Miller, who's a 2022 guy that Ohio State was interested in. He's going to be the starting left tackle at Clemson this year because he was the starting left tackle at Clemson last year. Zach Rice is a weird one. He was a name that was bantied around. He's like a third-team guard, it seems like, at North Carolina right now. Like, he has not popped. North Carolina has 2 super veteran tackles that are playing ahead of him. Blake Fisher is a Notre Dame guy. Notre Dame has 2 awesome tackles. Joe Alt at left tackle might be the best tackle in the country. And Blake Fisher at right tackle started as a true freshman and I think was maybe one of the first guys to do that at tackle for Notre Dame in a very, very long time. And they both played really well last year. Tristan Lee at Clemson is going to be the starting right tackle at Clemson. He's a third-year guy. He's a 2021 guy as well. Ohio State was very in on him. He has not played the first 2 years, but he's exactly on the path, right? That he didn't seize a job, but it's like, oh, Clemson has a new starting right tackle. It's like, yeah, it's a third-year guy and he's a 5-star recruit. This is his path. So if that's what Ohio State should have here, and they don't. And the result is you're asking guys to be more than they were expected to be. Maybe it's not more than they're capable of being, but it's more than they were expected to be. So these recruiting misses and the failure to solve the problem. And I don't know, where to assign, and not blame us, but like, why wasn't it solved? Is it Justin Fry not sealing the deal in the portal? Is it Ryan Day? Is it NIL? Like, I don't know what it was, but as you said, they end up taking Josh Simmons in the second portal window when the best guys were on the board in the first one, and I thought they were going to get one.
I mean, the two guys they took the biggest swings at, it seemed like, were Jeremiah Byers, who went from UTEP to Florida State, and AJ Cornelius, who went from Rhode Island to Oregon. So like Florida State and Oregon, I think it's pretty easy to do the math there. I think probably at least part of the reason Ohio State lost that is because they were not strong enough with the NIL situation to win those battles. I don't think it was a particularly strong transfer tackle class, and honestly, I don't really think trying to find transfer portal linemen is like any way to live. I just like as a means of doing business every year, I do not think that's a place you want to find yourself more often than not. And I don't think Ohio State is in jeopardy of that. But I think like having to go through it this year was like a lesson in like, this is not as fruitful as you think it is. I think other positions it's easier. And I think like one of the drafted offensive linemen in like the entire most recent NFL draft was a transfer. I think I have that right. So it's just not a place to go shopping when you're looking for high impact offensive linemen. Not to say there aren't some every year. There are probably like 2 or 3 tackles, but they took their swing at the top guys and didn't get them. And then had to settle for, I don't know if you want to call him, I guess he's a plan B guy in Josh Simmons. Like we talked a lot about like, oh, they'll just wait till after spring ball and like guys will pop into the portal. They'll get one of them. No one popped. Like there just wasn't a lot of guys there for them to go after. And I think another thing too, I want your thought on this because I've talked with Berm about this. Missing on the J.C. Lathams and Tristan Lee, we'll see what kind of player he becomes, but like the J.C. Lathams of the world, not closing the deal on those guys as detrimental to the efforts, no doubt about it. I also think misevaluations of Ohio / Midwestern linemen is like just as much of a culprit in this situation. There are guys every year, diamond in the rough players in this area of the country that turn into awesome offensive linemen. And Ohio State has had some of them, but they've taken a few that just did not pan out and passed on guys who went other places and did pan out. And I think that, I don't know if that was like taking guys in the state for granted or just not having enough of a discerning eye when evaluating those players. But I think I would, this might be crazy to say. I almost feel like those misevaluations have been more detrimental to where Ohio State is, or more impactful to where Ohio State is right now than like missing on a JC Latham. Because there are guys around the country that you can find that are from this state or from a nearby state that were in the 600s, 3-star guys, whatever you want to call them, that Ohio State just like never offered and are going to start this year. And I think Ohio State would love to have starting for them this year. And I think they need to be better at that part of the game too. And we'll see if Justin Fry is like, they have guys that fit that profile in this coming recruiting class, and the guys in this coming recruiting class like that they passed on and decided to go to Michigan. And we'll see. Like that's something you don't know if you were right or wrong on until probably 3 years down the road. But I think Ohio State needs to swing some more of those guys in their favor too, just as much as they need to land the 5-star national guys.
You don't want to give up on the 5-star national guys, but the worst thing you can do is spend all your time on the 5-star national guys you don't get, and then belatedly try to go after Ohio guys or Midwest guys who have already decided to go somewhere else because you ignored them. Yep. And that's no man's land. We were having a conversation as we were going through, guys. We were talking about Pitt. You mentioned Branson Taylor, who's a 2020 guy out of Ohio. Is he a starting tackle there? And I had the ACC, and I was like, oh, I don't know if he's going to start because this guy named Ryan Baer from the class of 2022 might win that job instead. And you're like, oh, he's from Ohio too. Yeah. I was like, oh, well, okay. I think they'd take either of those guys right now. Oh. The other thing about the transfer portal is, yes, it's hard. Michigan, who didn't need tackles as bad as Ohio State needed tackles, got 2 transfer tackles. They got Ladarius Henderson from Arizona State, and they got Miles Hinton from Stanford. Jim Harbaugh said he thinks they have 4 starting tackles at Michigan right now because they have 2 guys back. Yep. And I was like, wow, that's cool because Ohio State has none. So, yeah, like, yes, I know they didn't get the Oregon guy who's going to start at Oregon. They didn't get the Florida State guy who's going to be the starting right tackle at Florida State. But Michigan got 2 portal guys. No doubt that either Henderson or Hinton would start. No, right? There's not even, they would be drop in the starting lineup and play yesterday, right?
Yeah, they would. And I think that is like, I would levy that as a criticism at Ohio State. Like, I don't know what you call that. Like, they have like 6 tackles on this team, which is not enough. And I just think like there was so much unknown and the position is too important to be as selective as they were. And like, they talk about the culture fit and stuff like that. Like, I'm not trying to be dismissive of that. I do think that matters. You can't bring just anybody into your program because they play a position of need. Other things matter. But I also like to think of like a guy that culture fit at Michigan. He's probably a culture fit at Ohio State. No offense to anyone on either side of the rivalry. I think the way that they want to operate as football entities is probably more alike than they are not. So to like they didn't take enough swings. Like, I think they could have brought in 4 transfer tackles and just say like, may the best man win. But they didn't do that. I also think they should do that in recruiting. I think like if there are 6 Midwestern offensive linemen that you think have a shot to be good, don't guess and hope you got the right 3. Just take them all and then see what happens. And the ones who aren't good enough will transfer. And then you won't have to worry about that kid going to start at Pitt or going to start at West Virginia because you just took them from the start. But they'll never do that. They don't take like enough offensive linemen in general, I think, in their recruiting classes.
Okay, so we agree. So you gave right tackle a 6.7. I gave it a 5. I'm going to give left tackle a 1.5. I think it is a shade above the worst it could be because it's so uncertain. So what do you give left tackle?
I'm not quite that low, but I'm at like a 4 probably.
So let's talk a little bit more about Simmons because you watched him too. I just did feel like when the guy wasn't right in front of him, he was off balance. He was reaching at times. And I just think he's going to have trouble with good Big Ten ends, with guys who are good athletes and have moves and defensive coordinators who are going to change the picture on you and force you to adjust on the move. Yes, he started last year. I don't know how much. By the end of last year, I guess San Diego State had quarterback injuries. They were talking about like the guy who played safety at the beginning of the year was their quarterback. By the time I was watching the game, and they were like, they don't do anything anymore. They don't even like motion anybody before the snap because they don't want to confuse the quarterback who started the year playing defense. So it was so basic. It was so basic. So, and it's just, the Big Ten's not perfect. The Big Ten's getting better.
Yep.
The Big Ten, I think, is overranked statistically on defense a lot of times because their offenses are so bad that you look, it's like, oh, 6 of the best 10 defenses in the country are in the Big Ten. It's like, yeah, well, go look at the Big Ten quarterbacks. That's why. But also, they are good. And Wisconsin has good defensive players, and Penn State has good defensive players, and Minnesota has good defensive players. Like, there are going to be real dudes out there. And I just don't think a year of starting in the Mountain West simulates much of anything for what he's going to face this year.
Yep.
What is it about him where's the biggest upside? If it does work, why will it work?
I do think he's athletic. Again, he's another guy who does not look like he would be athletic, to your point about him needing to change a little bit physically, but I think he is. Like, I think he has pretty quick feet. Like, if you watch the clips that like he was tweeting out when he entered the portal, like, I thought a lot of those pass rush ups look pretty good. Now they're in practice, a lot of them. So what does that mean? Probably not much, but I do think you can see the vision with him sort of long term if you're able to like mold that into everything you need it to be. I do think there are athletic traits there that can make a good tackle. He's got good length. He has long arms, even though he's like 6'5", but he has a longer wingspan. Like, I would bet if Josh Fryar's wingspan is 6'9", I would bet that Josh Simmons is probably like 6'10" or maybe 6'11", approaching 7 feet. Like, good, like solid base, just like, you know, he's looks like a sturdy dude. Like, I think he can be good in the run game. I think he can anchor against guys who want to bull rush him. I think there needs to be probably more sophistication with guys who are going to throw a bunch of different moves at him and work like against counters and stuff like that. And that's probably why he will find points this year when he struggles. But if you have good feet and decent enough strength, like, I think that's a pretty good place to start from. And I think he has that. It's, can you polish up the technique? And I think Justin Fry is a pretty good technical offensive line coach. So he's part of this equation for me too. I think there's more to get out of Josh Simmons than San Diego State got out of him last year. And that's not necessarily a comment on like bad offensive line coaching, because they had a couple of guys who were first and second team all league there. Like, they had good players. But I think he'll get better coaching at Ohio State that can bring something more out of him than he was last year, even if he's not, a first team all Big Ten player in year one.
This conversation is about Ohio State's tackles in 2023. That's what matters. That's what's right in front of us right now. We're wondering whether the tackle situation could hold this team back. Ryan Day did talk about, when he was sort of describing moving guys around, that it's now and later. What do you think is the long-term play here? Because Josh Fryar can be back next year, but are they? And Tegra Shabola, was a big-time dude when he got here, and I think obviously still projects as a starter here somewhere at some point. Do you think they are trying to set up or want to set up a world where Josh Simmons is a left tackle next year, Luke Montgomery is the right tackle, maybe Josh Fryar is the right guard, Tegra Shabola is the left guard, and Carson Hinsman's the center, and they all have a little more experience and they don't add anybody? They're going to keep recruiting. They got, Josh Padilla and Austin Saraveld and everybody else they got to bring in. Miles Walker looks like a lifeguard. That they feel like maybe they'll take their lumps this year, but they also want some payoff in 2024. What do you think Ryan Day meant by that?
Yeah, I do. I think he was setting everyone up for like, maybe this does not look great all the time this year, but there is a long-term payoff coming. I think the 5 that you mentioned are the 5 who are going to be their starting offensive linemen next year. Like, I don't view Fryar or Simmons as guys who are going to jump to the league after this year, even though both of them can. Matthew Jones will. He's also his eligibility. Donovan Jackson seems likely to. So you're going to have to replace 2 starters. And I don't know if it is Simmons, Shabola, Carson Hinsman, Luke Montgomery, and Fryar somehow, some way. I think Luke Montgomery could play guard. Like, your guards are Tegra and Luke next year. And I think that's on the table. But yeah, I think like I think starting the guys we think are going to be the starting tackles, establishing Luke Montgomery as a guy who's in the two deep, who's like pushing the guys who think are going to be the starters already as a true freshman, I think is going to play a decent amount this year, is to get him ready for next year. Tegra played a little bit last year. He'll play more this year. They preserved his red shirt. I think that, so you have the starting five plus Tegra and Luke, I think are going to be guys that play quite a bit as backup linemen to set yourself up for what they hope to be a much better offensive line in 2024.
And then they got to get that Baker guy. Is that the tackle they got to get?
Brandon Baker, yeah, the kid from Mater Dei. Gerby Lambert is another one that he's from somewhere in New England. They got the New England pipeline going with Justin Fry.
Right. Don't start a New England pipeline and not credit Ryan Day. Ryan Day's dream is to create the New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine pipeline straight to Columbus. He'll build a new highway. Yeah,
they got Ian Moore too in this recruiting class already, who like some services have him as more of an interior guy, but like Rivals, I think still might have him as the number one tackle in the class, if I'm not mistaken. So he is like he like looks. Oh, I shouldn't say that. When they first got him, I was like, oh, this looks like the typical developmental like Midwest lineman. And then like he showed up in the summer, I was like, nope, that kid's a tackle. He like he put in a lot of work. So like I think he's in their backyard. They don't get as much credit for getting a guy like that. But if like Ian Moore was from Texas, I think people would be going nuts about him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Now he can come in and win a job as a true freshman next year when we have the same conversation. Okay. The only place you will find this information, where does Ohio State's tackle combo rank in the country? We'll go through team by team. Get ready for a breakdown of 68 tackle. No, we're not going to do that. We did that, though. So I did the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC.
Yep.
Landis did the Big 10 and the Pac-12. Let's start with the SEC.
Yep.
And I will say that I said 12 of the 14 teams in the SEC have a better tackle combo than Ohio State. And I got to tell you, Vanderbilt was a barn burner, but I gave Ohio State the edge. And I am just being real. The only two teams that I said were not better than Ohio State were Vanderbilt and Arkansas. Now, there are schools who are, and again, the context here is Ohio State maybe had the best tackle combo last year, and so they both left. And so then, like, the guys did. So there's some schools where it's like, oh, there's a third-year starter. It's like, well, that guy wouldn't have started ahead of Paris Johnson.
Right.
So Ohio State, right, there's just limited opportunities for Ohio State to have experienced tackles. The only way they'd have experienced tackles was if they brought in a guy from the portal who had 3 years at a Power 5 school, or if Josh Fryar had won a guard job last year. So some of these schools, it's like, hey, congratulations. You have linemen who weren't as good as Paris Johnson. But that guy at your school still started 3 years, so now he's a fourth-year starter, and I would take him ahead of what Ohio State has. So we understand the circumstances that leads to this, and if we want to blame someone, blame Paris Johnson. Paris Johnson, you're so good, this is your fault. No, but like for real, that's like part of this. We're acknowledging that. Yeah. Sometimes when you're so good at something, then right after it, it's hard to still be good. But also, Landis, it's also the situation, which is what we are trying to point out.
Yeah, and also a program like Ohio State should be better positioned than it is to sustain those kind of early departures. Also, like, is it a surprise that Paris Johnson left after 3 years? You should have been prepared for that, and they weren't.
No. I said all along, I said their tackle plan for 2023 was get down on their knees and beg Paris Johnson to stay.
Right.
And then it was like, I don't think Justin Fry begged hard enough. And it was like, but if you stay, maybe you can be the third pick instead of the sixth pick. Paris, but you could be. I said, tell me, you could be the sports editor of the paper,
the Lantern.
That would be like, I don't know, but maybe he could be the sports editor while he starts in the NFL. So Georgia has new tackles. Georgia has 2 new tackles, but they have 2 5-stars who are probably taking the jobs. Amarius Mims, who's a guy that you mentioned, as Ohio State would have liked to get him. He's a 2021 guy. He's probably going to be the starting right tackle at Georgia. And then Ernest Green is a 2022 guy.
That's another guy that Ohio State thought they were going to get.
He was the number 45 overall player in 2022. Neither of them have much experience. They're probably the 2 tackles. There's another guy from 2020 who's in the fight at left tackle, but it's like, hey, Georgia, they lost their tackles too. And it's like, yeah, they got replacements lined up. So like, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Right. That's where Georgia lost their tackles, but so that is, it's not known, but you have expectations. Bama has JC Latham at right tackle. And then Caden Proctor, who's a guy that probably should be at Ohio State also, but they were never really in the mix for. Midwestern guy from Iowa, committed to Iowa, flipped to Bama. He might start at left tackle as a true freshman. But if not, they have another 5-star who's a sophomore who might start instead. So Bama has 3 5-stars, one from 21, one from 22, one from 23, and 2 of the 3 will be their starting tackles. Tennessee got a Miami transfer who's a 6th-year guy with a gazillion starts, who's probably going to be their left tackle. I'd take him at Ohio State, so I'd take Tennessee's guys. LSU has 2 guys who started as true freshmen last year, left and right. They both made some freshman All-American teams. They're both back as returning starters. So a year ago, LSU was probably freaking out. LSU was like, oh my God, we're starting 2 freshmen. But now they're locked in. So, okay, right? Last year, you would have taken Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones 100 times over LSU. But now LSU is reaping the benefits of that. Florida's got guys. One of them is a Florida international transfer who's a 4-year starter who has 1,500 career snaps and had a 61 PFF grade last year. Josh Simmons had a 47 PFF grade. So it's like, oh, Florida's right tackle is a Florida international guy. It's like, yeah, he's played a gazillion snaps and he was rated higher than Josh Simmons. I don't know what to tell you. So like, that's just, there's a lot of that. There's just a lot of, it's either a transfer and a super experienced guy, or there's like 5 stars waiting in the wings. So it was not much of a decision. Ja'Kai Moore at South Carolina, 17 career starts at left tackle, 60 PFF grade. Is he perfect? No, he was a top 500 recruit, but he's kind of like Josh Fryar, but he's played 2 years. So I don't know. I'd take him ahead of Josh Fryar. So, it's just stuff like that, Landis, that I got to 12 of 14 in the SEC, and I felt pretty comfortable doing it.
I mean, all the profiles that you talked about are I would take those over what Ohio State has. I'm surprised it ended up being that many in the SEC, but I also didn't hear anything there that I like really would quibble with. Yeah. I don't know, like the Florida international guy, like why didn't Ohio State go after him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the stuff that's frustrating.
All right. So 12 of 14 in the SEC. What was the Pac-12, Landis?
So the Pac-12 was not quite as dramatic. I landed on 5 teams in the Pac-12 whose tackle combinations I would take over Ohio State's. The 5 were Arizona, who's got Jordan Morgan, who is first team all Pac-12, had 25 starts under his belt, good PFF grades, was the 1,581st ranked player in his recruiting class, but just turned into an absolute animal. Going to be a high draft pick. He almost grad transferred. Like when I was looking at guys like, oh, I wonder who Ohio State might get. And I was like, Jordan Morgan enters the portal. Ohio State needs to do everything it can to get that guy to come here. And then like he never did. He decided to stay there. And then they are moving a guard to their right tackle position. Jonah, it's a Polynesian name. I apologize for butchering it. Savanea, I think is how you say it. He was a freshman All-American last year as a true freshman starter at guard. You're going to move him to right tackle. And I was watching what's their coach's name again? The guy at Arizona, Jed Fish. Interview with Jed Fish, where he was talking about this. Like this kid might actually be like maybe the best lineman in the Pac-12. And he's moving to tackle this year. So they're set. I would take that. No questions asked. Oregon, I thought was interesting. So Oregon has AJ Cornelius, the transfer from Rhode Island that Ohio State had visited and tried to get. He's going to be their starting right tackle. First team guy in the Colonial Athletic Conference, 22 starts at Rhode Island. Like he was, I think to some people, the best transfer tackle that was available in the offseason. Opposite him, it looks like it's going to be Josh Connerly, former 5-star prospect, number 16 overall player in the 2022 recruiting class. So he'll be a second-year guy this year. Played in 13 games last year, was like their jumbo offensive lineman. They made sure to like season him last year, I think, believing that he was going to be a starter this year. So it's experienced transfer, 5-star dude ready to step up into a starting job. I take it. Oregon State has Joshua Gray and Talise Fuaga.
Fuaga is really good.
Yeah, like they were both second team all Pac-12 last year, which kind of surprised me a little bit. Combined, they have more than 40 starts. Not good recruiting pedigrees, but just like maulers, experienced maulers that they like. I don't know what they're doing in Corvallis, but they're churning out offensive linemen. And these guys are good development stories.
When we were doing the College Football Survivor show, my previous national college show, we did trades, college football trades several months ago. I might have traded Emeka Ibuka to Oregon State for Fuaga.
Oh.
And like, you know what? Just put Cardell Tate in. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
Lock down a tackle spot. Yeah. And Emeka Ibuka becomes like the best player in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I would do that. Washington, Troy Fautanu was a second team All Pac-12, 16 starts, 77.9 PFF grade, top 400 recruit. Like, I think has like day 2 draft upside, like good player. Roger Rosengarten, I think was a player that Ohio State might have offered. Second year guy, 13 third year guy, 13 starts last year as a redshirt freshman. Another All Pac-12 guy. He was third team last year. His PFF grade was better than Fautanu's, and he was a top 200 recruit. So they're pretty well set there. 2 experienced returning guys, decent enough pedigrees, good performance last year. They're going to be existing in a world where like the interior of their offensive line is not particularly good, and it wasn't very good last year, but they were good in spite of that. So I think they'll be good again this year. I would take that over what Ohio State has. And then the one that I went back and forth on a little bit, and what ultimately decided to put here was USC. Jonah Monheim is going to be one of their starting tackles. He has 21 starts under his belt. His PFF grades are good. He also gave up a ton of pressures last year, but he's an experienced guy at the very least. And he was like the number 9 ranked tackle, I think, by PFF last year, just like sort of overall going by grades. So solid player, probably needs to tighten up some of the pass protection stuff. And then opposite him, it looks like they're going to start Michael Tarkin, who was a transfer from Florida, has 20 starts under his belt. Looks like a halfway decent PFF numbers if we're using that as a base here. So guy who's been in the program for a few years, made starts there, transferred from another program, who's made a few starts there, Power 5 nonetheless, not a G5 transfer. I think I would take that over what Ohio State has. So Arizona, Oregon State, USC, Washington out of the Pac-12.
5 out of 12. All right, let's go to Notre Dame. We both agree on Notre Dame. Joe Wald at left tackle is awesome, and Blake Fisher at right tackle is very good. Yep. And there's no doubt about it. And neither of those guys would be Ohio State's best tackle.
Yep.
So Notre Dame is 1 of 1 as an independent. In the SEC, Clemson, Blake Miller, ACC. Blake Miller, as you mentioned, 2022 guy, 71.8 PFF grade last year, starting as a freshman, first team freshman All-American. And then Tristan Lee, 2021 guy, third year guy, has no experience, but he's a 5-star who's on path. Clemson, I would take. FSU, and I'm very high on Florida State this year. They got Jeremiah Byers in the portal out of UTEP, 79.5 PFF grade last year, has 30 career starts. Ohio State would take him in a heartbeat. And then Bless Harris seems to be their left tackle. He got hurt last year. He's a former Lamar guy, transferred previously to Florida State from there, but it seems like he's having a really good camp, and I think people are excited about him. He's a 2018 guy, so he's been around forever. Like, not a sure thing, but it feels like an old veteran guy who's maybe ready to peak. I'd take FSU. Miami has 5 stars out your wazoo.
Francis Mauigoa, my guy. Animal.
And Samson Okunlola. Yeah. So they have 2 5-star freshmen who probably aren't going to start. Jalen Rivers is a guy who started 10 games last year. And then Zion Nelson is a guy they really like, but he got hurt last year and he's not all the way back. There's some first-round NFL talk with him. So Miami might have 2 5-star freshmen just sitting around. Or they might play.
Can borrow one?
They're in good shape. So Miami's in good shape. I'd take Miami. Zach Rice at North Carolina, as we said, it's weird. He's like, was the top-ranked tackle in the class of 2022, like, has not happened yet. It's not happening for him. But North Carolina has a year 6 guy and a year 5 guy as returning starters. Their PFF grades aren't great, but they've been around the block. And if I'd trade Fryar and Simmons for them because it's 2 guys who have played a ton, and I think they'd be serviceable. And so it's not a slam dunk, but like for right now, you're trying to win. I'd take 2 super old dudes who have started before in the Power 5. So that's not quite as obvious, but I'd take them. Pitt, as we talked about, they have a guy at right tackle who's made 21 career starts, PFF grade over 70 last year, and then Branson Taylor or Ryan Baer at left tackle, the Ohio guys. BC is interesting. This is just like an example of like, how can Boston College be in this situation? Boston College has a 2020 guy who was a top 200 national recruit, started last year, 62 PFF grade, And their right tackle is a transfer from Virginia who started last year at Virginia, was a number 360 player coming out of high school. So they have two tackles who are ranked in the top 400 coming out of high school and have starting experience. And I'd take BC. I'd take Boston College's tackles. Syracuse, they happen to have a right tackle. The Joe Moore Award is the award they give the best offensive line. So I think to try to win that award, Syracuse got a transfer from Richmond, whose name is Joe Moore. But he only spells it with one O, and the award is with two O's. So take that, Syracuse. I don't think your little ploy is going to work.
I don't think I've ever seen someone spell their last name Moore with only one O before.
Only one O. Yeah. So 37 career starts at Richmond, which is an FCS program, but been around the block. I don't know anything about that guy. He's played a ton of college football. I think I might take it. Here. So Louisville has a Purdue transfer who started for 2 years and a 4-year starter at right tackle. I'd take that. Duke has a guy that PFF grades as the second best tackle in the country. Graham Barton. I texted you. I was like, Ohio State would kill for Duke's tackles. And their right tackle is a Stanford transfer, another Stanford transfer with 23 career starts. So, like, they're set. Wake Forest was right on the border, and I gave Ohio State the edge. They have a 7th-year guy. Wake Forest's starting left tackle is a 7th-year guy with 500 career snaps. So he's been in college for 6 years. He's barely played. He was like, year 7 is it, baby. So I said I actually would take Ohio State over that. But in the end, it was 9 out of 14 in the ACC.
Yeah, the thing that's hard, like I don't, we're basing it off the information we have available, right? We're not experts on exactly who these guys are and how they play. There's probably a little bit of banking on experience there that I don't think is inherently wrong, but I would ask, like, if we took a closer look at some of those tandems and assess like their athletic upside compared to what Ohio State's is it actually better? And if it's not, I think I might rather have Ohio State's.
I might rather have Ohio State's long term. I still don't know if I'd rather have Ohio State's right now. So like that is, but your point, just because you've played doesn't mean you're better, because by October, the Ohio State guys will have played and they might be better athletes. They probably are better athletes.
Right.
And then, okay, where are we? So there were a couple that were borderline in there, but in the end, 9 of 14. You did the Big Ten. What'd you do for that?
So I had 3 that I felt pretty strongly about, and then a 4th I want to ask your opinion on. The 3, Penn State, Olu Fashanu is going to be in the conversation for first quarterback or first non-quarterback taken in the draft, like with Marvin Harrison and like Jared Verse probably from Florida State. Absolute stud. The right side of their line, I think, it's not nearly as good nor established, but they have 2 guys in Caden Wallace, who has 27 career starts, and Drew Shelton, who started 5 games last year. I believe he was a true freshman last year, and he started 5 games. So one of those 2 guys is going to be their starting right tackle. So it's like top 10 pick in the draft. And then on the right side, guys who have at least played and have decent enough recruiting pedigrees. Caden Wallace was number 81 overall in his recruiting class, and Drew Shelton was number 122 overall. Like, Penn State seems like it's starting to get it going a little bit on the offensive line. We'll see how it goes when they have to replace the first round pick at tackle. But
that's been a real problem for them in recent years on the offense.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I don't even think it's close. This is the best line they've had since James Franklin's been there, and probably the best line they've had in probably like 15 years or so. So they're good. Like, I would definitely take that tackle situation over what Ohio State has. Michigan, who you mentioned earlier, they have 4 starting tackles according to Jim Harbaugh. I'm interested to see how it shakes out. But I think I would take that situation over what Ohio State has. There's a lot of experience there. The 4 guys combined have started 67 games, 46 of them at tackle. Ladarius Henderson is coming from Arizona State. He was like more of an interior guy. So I guess there's a question of like, are you a left tackle in the Big Ten or are you a right tackle in the Big Ten? That's fair to ask. Miles Hinton at Stanford, I think his name might have come up when Ohio State was looking at guys. And I don't know that I looked at him as like a slam dunk, go get him. Like, maybe in hindsight, he should have been, because they ended up not taking enough, as I said earlier. But I don't know if that is like oh boy, like watch out for this guy. But then like Carson Barnhart started 15 games at right tackle. Trente Jones has started 8 games. the average of all four of those guys, if recruiting wise, is like a top 300 player. And the only reason it's that low is because Ladarius Henderson, who might be the best of the bunch, was number 730 overall in his recruiting class. So it's a good foursome. I think out of that four, they're going to end up with two pretty good starting tackles. And I would certainly take that over what Ohio State has right now, just in terms of like stability and experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a better place to be. And then the other one was Wisconsin, which I was less confident in. Like Jack Nelson is a really good player. 25 starts. He was honorable mention all Big Ten last year. Like he'll be in the conversation for first team all Big Ten this year. Could really see his draft stock kind of skyrocket this year. I don't know who their right tackle is going to be. It could be Riley Mahlman, who I think started like the beginning of last year, then got hurt. Does not have tremendous PFF grades. Does have a top 200 recruiting pedigree. Or like it could be Nolan Rucci, who's a former 5-star prospect. So I think like good established left tackle, probably going to be a high draft pick. And then like either a guy who has some starting experience under his belt or a 5-star guy who I guess is Nolan Rucci would be in his second year now. I would take that over what Ohio State has. And then the last one I wanted to ask you about is Maryland, which I can't even believe I'm saying. Delmar Glaze is back as their right tackle. He's played a lot. He's got 19 starts. He had the second best pass protection grade of any tackle in the Big Ten last year. Like he's not a tremendous player, but he is like a solid Big Ten starter and a guy who's probably going to get drafted. And their left tackle, it seems like, is going to be a transfer from Frostburg State. His name is Gadi Ayedzi. He was a Division II All-American who was invited to the Senior Bowl last year, but instead of entering the draft, he went back. Well, I guess he didn't go back home. Frostburg State's also in Maryland. But instead of going into the draft, where he probably would have been picked, he went to Maryland to try to improve his draft stock. And this is a kid who like didn't start playing football until I think his senior year of high school. He was like a soccer player who just kind of turned into a monster tackle at the Division II level and then transferred to the Big Ten to play for Maryland. And that is a big jump. There's certainly no guarantee it's going to work. But what does the combo of like returning solid starter and like pure upside play on a guy who was a Division II All-American do for you?
Well, you said the Frostburg State guy probably would have been drafted.
I mean, he was invited to the Senior Bowl out of a Division II school. Yeah.
Do you think Josh Simmons would have been drafted if he had been able to go to the NFL after last season at San Diego State?
No.
So I'd take Maryland. Josh Simmons is not in improve his draft stock mode right now, like the Frostburg State guy is. Yeah. Josh Simmons, I think, is in survival mode. So that sounds pretty good to me, man. Like, again, the level of it's a jump, but again, it's a jump from San Diego State. So yeah, that's a money play. That dude's betting money on this, right?
Yeah, like I think he's trying to go from like a 6th round pick to like a 3rd round pick, or a 7th round pick to a 3rd round pick, or UDFA to a 3rd round pick. Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I think that it's again, it's hard. It's like it's a right now proposition, and then like down the road. I think like eventually Josh Fryar will be a better tackle than Delmar Glaze. Is he right now today as we're talking about it? I don't know. Probably not. So I think you can convince me rather easily that Maryland's tackle situation is more desirable at the moment.
Yeah. Consider yourself convinced.
Yeah.
5? So that's 5 in the Big Ten or 4?
No, that's 4. Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Maryland.
4 of the other 13. All right. I did the Big 12. Texas has like a borderline All-American guy at left tackle, Kelvin Banks. Their right tackle is a 6th-year guy, 3rd-year starter, definitely Texas. Oklahoma State's guy is a Texas State transfer. Dalton Cooper, good sheriff name, good Big 12 tackle name. 3-year starter at Texas State, 72.3 PFF grade last year. It's like, I don't know. I'm taking a look at him if I was Ohio State. And their right tackle has 29 career starts, 68 PFF grade last year. I'd take Oklahoma State. Walter Rouse, as we talked about before, Stanford transfer, can be the left tackle at Oklahoma. 39 career starts. He's not great, but he's been around the block. Their right tackle's okay. I'd take Oklahoma. I would take TCU. I would take BYU. Their left tackle, Kingsley Suamaitea is like a real dude. right?
Monster.
I think he's like a real dude.
Yep.
So he's a left tackle, and their transfer is their right tackle is a transfer from Oklahoma State, who was Oklahoma State's starting left tackle last year. So his PFF grade wasn't very good, but he started at left tackle in the Big 12 last year, and now he's going to be the right tackle at BYU. So I would take BYU. West Virginia is actually pretty good. I think we talked about it. Doug Nestor, right guard, is bumping out to right tackle with 41 career guard starts at Virginia Tech and West Virginia. And then Wyatt Millum is their left tackle. He's a 2-year starter, 75 PFF grade last year. So I would take West Virginia. Kansas State has a couple 19 starts and 35 career starts with okay dudes. I'd take them. Houston has a really good guy who's going to get drafted, Patrick Paul, 32 career starts, 2,000 career snaps, 75 PFF grade last year, and their right tackle's not bad. I would take what Houston has, and not Cincinnati. So that was good for Ohio State, that I would take Ohio State's tackles over Cincinnati's tackles. But in the end, it's 9 of 14 for me in the Big 12. And again, some of it is if you've really got a dude, like when you said the Wisconsin stuff, it's like if you've got like a dude, like a guy who's going to get drafted after this season, who's an all-conference candidate, I almost don't care who the other guy is, because to start with a dude, I think is such a big deal, because then you can help. Yeah. Then you can scheme and help and chip and slide to help the other guy. But just like when you don't have a sure thing, I just think it throws everything else off. So 9 of 14 for me in the Big 12. Is there anything that you thought was crazy?
No. I mean, it would be similar to what I said about some of the ACC teams you mentioned. Like, I'd love to be able to gauge some of the athleticism of those tandems compared to Ohio State's, but it's hard to pass on experience when there's so much unknown with Ohio State's. Even if you believe that they could become good players, and even if you believe they can be good players in relatively short order, like a this year proposition, I still think it's hard to pass on some of the experience you're laying out.
You won't find anybody else doing this. According to Kings of Columbus, Ohio State has the 41st best offensive tackle combo in the Power 69. What do you think of that? Is that a ranking that is going to worry Ohio State fans?
Probably. And I think it should. Like it has the potential to be a real Achilles heel for this team for sure. Like I'm not trying to downplay that. That's real. I think because like I think very highly of Josh Fryar, clearly. And like he to me is a guy, like now that he's at right tackle, and maybe it's silly for it to crystallize this way for me, but like you put him at right tackle and I just don't think you have to worry about him. And then like maybe you are concerned about the left side, but then you just help Josh Simmons with Donovan Jackson, who will be one of the best guards in the country, and like Cade Stover. So like I think there's a way to work around it. Ohio State should never be starting from this position. Like this is bad. Like that they got to this point is bad. I don't think it is necessarily prohibitive when it comes to achieving their goals, but they shouldn't be there. And if anyone is concerned about hearing that number, I think you should be.
If Josh Fryar was your second best tackle and JC Latham was your best tackle, right? I think Josh Fryar is fine as your second best tackle. But if he's your best guy, so you can help everything on the other side and we'll leave Josh Fryar on the island, I just think you're short both places.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I don't think Josh Fryar can be a starting Big Ten tackle. I think he might be a better starting Big Ten guard, but I just can't believe that he's the surest thing. So I can't believe they're here. I can't believe this happened this way for them. And the thing of it, Landis, is this isn't like one recruiting miss or one thing in the portal. This is like 10. It's like, well, you missed on like to get to this. It really is a consistent failure over a number of years on multiple fronts. And they hope that the experience of playing the guys are going to have to play will help them dig out of this starting in 2024. But we have seen it at other positions. I think the cornerback dip at Ohio State was multi-year, right? And when you got to a point, did it matter in 2021 that the cornerback level wasn't up to the standard when Seven Banks all of a sudden didn't play and Legend Cavazos and Ryan Watts weren't good enough and Denzel Burke had to start as a true freshman and Joe Moorhead as the Oregon offensive coordinator diagrammed Ohio State's cornerbacks into the ground? Yeah.
Yep.
It mattered that the recruiting dip and the inability to patch that room, it mattered a lot. And I think that is on the table for the tackles this season.
I agree. But there's a reason we've been talking about it every recruiting cycle for the last 4 years, because something like this could have been coming. And it's here. And I guess we'll see what happens with it. Like, I have not been, by the end of this conversation, I do not think I have been convinced that this is definitely going to be a problem for them. But that's probably a good default. I probably am a little too optimistic about the situation. When the reality is, like, they're in a not great spot.
Something to watch. We'll all have our eyes on it in the opener at Indiana. Be very curious to see where they are by the time they get to Notre Dame. And then I really think Penn State's going to be the test. Penn State's defense is really good. Manny Diaz as defensive coordinator at Penn State, I think there's a lot of confidence in him and a lot of confidence built because of him, and he's going to have a plan. So that's October, and that could matter. Like, that could be the game that's getting the playoff or not, because I think this Big Ten race is going to be super interesting, and Ohio State's tackles and their entire offense will need to be ready for that. Okay. That was long. I hope it was worth it. I think it was worth it for us to go through the exercise to try to get a handle on this. It's not the end all be all. You know, we're not saying that our ranking is definitive, but I think we gave you context that is valuable against Ohio State's own standard and against their peers at the top of college football. And by the way, receivers, they're one.
Mm-hmm.
Defensive line, they're top 5, probably. We think the secondary could be great. I think they have a top 5 secondary, possibly. When you see the way Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers play and the veterans that they are and the snaps they've played and their grades and the things they do, linebacker set. So that's why this stands out, because they're usually good everywhere. And they are good almost everywhere else right now. So
they really are. Yeah.
Like, they really are. So we're not trying to be negative. We're just trying to get you ready. So you have a realistic view of this. But again, it's not about the guys. It's about the program putting guys in this situation. All right. We'll be back with the Kings of Columbus later this weekend. That one will include what you're talking, what you're thinking, what you're eating, what you're watching, what you're talking. That's the whole podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, what you talking, Landis? I'm talking tackles for 120 minutes. What are you talking about? So we appreciate you guys being with us. Watch us on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For now, for Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of Columbus.